Welcome to Era Decoded, where we unravel the hidden stories behind history, technology, and space. Today, we peel back the layers of one of mankind's greatest achievements and expose a darker truth lurking in its shadow. This is the story of the space race and why it was never about reaching the stars, but about controlling the Earth. We've all been told a story, a grand, heroic tale of humanity reaching for the stars. We've seen the grainy footage of brave astronauts planting a flag on the moon. We were taught that the space race was a noble quest for knowledge, a peaceful competition that pushed the boundaries of science for all mankind. But what if that story is a lie? What if it's a carefully constructed narrative, a piece of theater played out on a global stage? The reality is far darker, far more cynical. The race to the heavens wasn't born from a yearning for discovery. It was forged in the fires of war, shaped by fear and driven by a ruthless desire for global dominance. It was never about exploring new worlds. It was about controlling this one. The space race was, from its very beginning, a military operation disguised as a scientific adventure. A lie we have all been told. Section 1. The Peenemünde Precedent. Before NASA, there was Peenemünde, a remote German island where modern rocketry was born. This is where Wernher von Braun and his team developed the V-2 rocket during World War II. But this wasn't a tool of exploration. It was the world's first long-range ballistic missile, a weapon of vengeance designed to rain down on cities like London and Antwerp, killing thousands of innocent people. And the V-2, this supposed marvel of engineering, was built on a foundation of pure human suffering. It was assembled in a horrific underground factory called Mittelwerk, using slave labor from the Mittelbau-Dora concentration camp. An estimated 20,000 prisoners were worked to death to build the very rockets that would become the bedrock of the American space program. And Wernher von Braun, the man celebrated as the hero of Apollo, was directly involved. So when Germany fell, the race for its secrets began. In a secret program with a name straight out of a spy novel, Operation Paperclip, the U.S. government recruited von Braun and over 1,600 other German scientists. It didn't matter that many were dedicated members of the Nazi Party, or that some, like von Braun himself, were officers in the SS. Their pasts were whitewashed. Their expertise was just too valuable. The architects of the V-2 were given new labs, new money, and a new mission. Build bigger, more powerful rockets for America. Their target was no longer London. It was the heavens, and by extension, the Soviet Union. From that moment on, the DNA of the space program was forever linked with war. Section 2. The Sputnik Shock and the Birth of a Stunt. For a few years, this rocket development chugged along under the radar as military defense. Then, on October 4, 1957, the world woke up to a new sound, a faint electronic beep coming from orbit. The Soviet Union had launched Sputnik 1, a tiny metal sphere that changed everything. To the American public, that beep was an alarm bell. The Sputnik crisis ignited a wave of national humiliation and panic. Newspapers screamed that America was losing. Senators called it a devastating blow. The fear was simple. If the Soviets could orbit a satellite, they could orbit a bomb. Funny enough, President Eisenhower wasn't that worried. He knew Sputnik itself posed no direct threat, but the political pressure was suffocating. His own advisors warned him that America looked weak. Lyndon B. Johnson, a master politician, used the moment to hammer the administration for falling behind. The response was massive. Billions were suddenly poured into science education, and in 1958, NASA was born. But NASA wasn't conceived from a moment of pure curiosity. It was a panicked reaction to a perceived military threat from a Cold War enemy. Its job was to prove American superiority, plain and simple. Even the name, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, was a strategic masterstroke. By making it a civilian agency, the U.S. could broadcast its achievements as peaceful exploration. It was the perfect public relations cover. The military work would continue in the shadows, knowing, of course. But the public face of America's space efforts would be one of science and wonder. The stage was now set for the greatest political stunt in history. Section 3. The Moonshot. A propaganda masterpiece. In April 1961, the Soviets did it again. Cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space. For the new, young President John F. Kennedy, this was an absolute humiliation. He needed a win, a grand gesture that would scream, "USA is #1 to the entire world." He turned to his advisors, and Vice President Lyndon Johnson laid out the cold political math. "In the eyes of the world," he said, "first in space means first, period. Second in space is second in everything." He argued that landing on the moon had immense propaganda value. This was never about science. It was about winning. Just weeks after Gagarin's flight, Kennedy stood before Congress and made his famous declaration. America would land a man on the moon and return him safely before the end of the decade. He said we do it not because it is easy, but because it is hard. A great line. But the real motivation was political. A moon landing was simply part of the battle along the fluid front of the Cold War. The Apollo program was born, and the price tag was jaw-dropping. It cost about $25.8 billion then, over $280 billion today. At its peak, NASA's budget was over 4% of all federal spending. Meanwhile, the War on Poverty received just $1.8 billion. Beating the Soviets was worth every dollar. The mission was sold as an adventure for all mankind, but every move was calculated for its political impact. When Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin finally stepped onto the lunar surface in July 1969, what was the first thing they did? They planted an American flag, not a symbol of exploration, but a claim of conquest, a victory for a political ideology. The world was mesmerized. The Soviets, whose own secret moon program had failed, had no choice but to pretend they weren't trying. The lie had become reality. Section 4. The Military-Industrial Scientific Complex. While the world watched the smiling civilian astronauts of NASA, the deeper truth was humming along in secret. The technologies that took us to space had two purposes. The same powerful rockets that launched Apollo could just as easily launch nuclear warheads. The satellites that would give us GPS were first designed as spy tools. Space exploration and the militarization of space have always been two sides of the same coin. And this gets to the heart of a warning from the man who started it all, President Eisenhower. In his farewell address in 1961, he didn't talk about the glory of space. He warned America about a new, dangerous power. In the councils of government, he said, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence by the military-industrial complex. Eisenhower saw exactly what was happening. He saw a permanent arms industry fused with a massive military, funded by a government obsessed with being #1. The space race was the perfect public justification for a secret arms race. Ike admitted he felt the pressure himself. His generals would tell him they needed more money, or the Soviets would get ahead. So I invariably gave in, he said. He witnessed the vicious cycle. A perceived threat creates public fear, leading to political pressure for more spending, making defense contractors richer and entrenching the military's power. The space race was the ultimate engine for this cycle. Apollo wasn't just a race against the Soviets, it was the crown jewel of the very complex Eisenhower warned us about. If you're finding this look behind the curtain as fascinating as I do, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We've got more official stories to question.
Thoughtful.
Section 5. The Legacy of the Lie. So what's the legacy of this incredible deception? We got heroes. We got historic moments. We got spin-off technologies that have improved our lives, from cordless drills to medical imaging. But we were also sold a fiction, that exploration can ever be truly separate from power. Somber. The lie of the space race has haunted us ever since. It created a world where public support for expensive space projects depends on nationalism and threats. Once the political goal, beating the Soviets, was achieved, what happened? Emphatic. The political will simply vanished. Disappointed. Public and political interest dried up. The last 3 Apollo missions were canceled. The program was scrapped. For over 50 years, no human has been back to the moon, mostly because the urgent political reason disappeared. Pensive. And today, we see the echoes everywhere, in the new space race. Concern. Tensions between nations are once again fueling talk of lunar bases and Mars colonies. Private companies work hand in hand with governments and militaries to dominate this new frontier. The story is once again about securing a strategic advantage, about money, resources, and national pride. Serious. The story of the space race isn't a simple tale of good versus bad. It's an uncomfortable reminder of how our greatest dreams can be twisted to serve our darkest instincts for conflict and control. The engineers, the scientists, even the astronauts themselves may have been driven by genuine passion, but the machine they served, the space race, was guided by a much colder logic. Conclusion. We were told the space race was about reaching for the moon. In reality, it was always about controlling the Earth. It was a high-stakes geopolitical drama, a multi-billion-dollar propaganda campaign, and the ultimate expression of Cold War rivalry. It was a raw demonstration of power, designed to awe the world and intimidate an enemy. It was a story told to mask its true purpose. The rockets came from Nazi weapons programs. The mission was born from military panic. The goal was political propaganda. The entire endeavor was fueled by the unaccountable might of the military-industrial complex. The noble quest for knowledge was just the cover story. The space race was a lie. And it's a lie that reminds us that whenever we reach for the stars, we always carry our earthly baggage with us. What do you think? Was the space race a noble journey or a brilliant political charade? Should space exploration be about curiosity, or is it destined to be a tool of politics and war? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Today, as a new space race begins, will we repeat the same mistakes? We've decoded the era. Now it's your turn. If you're ready to see beyond the official stories and ask the questions others fear, hit like and join the conversation. Comment below. Subscribe to Era Decoded, where history is unmasked and the truth is laid bare. Until next time, question everything, trust nothing, and stay decoded.